Make then. So let's turn our attention to him as he presents to us.
All of us makes multiple decisions every day that we have to make. If you are a coffee drinker, unlike me, you probably have an issue whether to get venti or grande. I still don't know the difference because I don't drink coffee. Or if you're like me, then one of the hardest decisions that I have to face is when I'm asked the question, medium or large. Right? So it's not just on trivial day-to-day things that we are faced with decisions. We cannot help making decisions. But more importantly, when it comes to Jehovah and his service, making decision takes on a whole level of gravity, a whole level of weight, does it not? It's more than just paper or plastic, right? It's deeper in meaning. Now, many people, when it comes to serving Jehovah, have a tendency to be indecisive, not wanting to make a decision. Turn your Bibles, please, to the book of James chapter 1, verse 7 and 8. And let's see what the Bible's viewpoint is on this issue of being indecisive. James chapter 1, verse 7 and 8. And again, we're talking about service to Jehovah. James chapter 1, 7 and 8. In fact, that man should not expect to receive anything from Jehovah. Why? Verse 8, he is an indecisive man, unsteady in all his ways. Now notice how the Bible says that if one is indecisive, he is unsteady in everything. So it puts into perspective the gravity of the situation of not being decisive. As a matter of fact, the Greek word for indecisiveness means two-souled, having two different souls. And we know that's impossible, right? Jesus laid that out. We cannot have two masters. So being indecisive is something that the Bible frowns on, something that Jehovah does not really appreciate. And of course, we know from our study of the Bible that Jehovah wants us to serve him whole soul, not two-souled. And so then it's important for us to learn how to make sound decisions so that we can make Jehovah proud, because we can never go back in time and undo some of the decisions that we've made in the past. It could be as recent as yesterday or 10 years ago. We simply cannot make it up. And so it's important to make sound decisions from this point onward. And so the purpose of our discussion this morning is for that particular purpose, to help us make decisions, how we can make sound decisions. Now, you'll notice there's a lot of questions that we will be asking the audience. These are all open-ended questions. And the reason for that is where the decision is ultimately going to rest upon us. But we will consider from the Bible, scripturally, how we can make sound decisions. So let's begin our discussion with that. One of the first things we need to keep in mind when it comes to making decisions is we need to make decisions that's commensurate to our role. Commensurate to our role. For example, a husband and wife and children under the headship arrangement, there are certain decisions that a child may choose to do, right? And they're free to make that decisions, but they are under the direction of their parents, mother or father. There's a certain decisions that a wife is entitled to do scripturally, right? Psalm 31 outlines all those decisions, but there are certain decisions that she has to abdicate to her spiritual head, or even a physical head, right? If that's not a spiritual person or baptized person. So there's certain decisions that we ourselves individually, whether we're children or adults, that we can make, but we need to consider that we need to make decisions that's commensurate with our role. The second point that we'll keep in mind when making decisions is that of involving our Christian conscience. That when we make decisions, we need to do so based on our Christian conscience. Now, we won't have time to go into detail about the difference between Christian conscience and regular conscience, but let's give some examples. For example, our choice of employment, right? If our job was to be a receptionist or an engineer at a company that makes weapons of mass destruction, well, we're just a receptionist, we're just a janitor. Would that be making decisions in alignment with our Christian conscience? Well, obviously not, right? Well, what if we were a nurse, or we are a doctor, and the patient, our patient, chooses to have blood transfusion? What's our Christian conscience going to allow us to do? Give the patient blood or not? Again, making decision based on our Christian conscience. The use of our entertainment, the use of our time is also decided by our conscience, right? No one can really dictate yes or no on that. Each and every one of us have to make that decision. Well, can I, for example, for sports and recreation, can I choose karate? Right? I'm not hurting anyone, it's discipline. But Christian conscience, taking into account what is right, what is wrong. So then, in alignment with Christian conscience, each and every one's decision will differ from one another. So there's three things we need to keep in mind when decisions making Christian conscience. Number one, we never superimpose our own conscience on others. In other words, if it's a matter of conscience, this is what I say, this is what you should say. That is not scripturally sound. We should also not belittle others as being over scrupulous or overly conservative. So if someone else makes a decision that's a little bit more conservative or liberal than our Christian conscience, we cannot judge them. It's Christian conscience. Yes, we cannot criticize and judge others when it comes to those things. So where a personal decision based on our conscience is required, the decision is ours alone to make. But we need to keep in mind, each and every one of us will be held accountable by Jehovah. The third area when it comes to making decisions is that although one has the responsibility to make a decision, it's considerate to discuss the matters first with others who may be involved. Discuss it with others. It's our decision, but why is it important for us to discuss it with others? Note this Watchtower article, what this had to say, and I quote, "A refreshing Christian husband also will not be despotic or tyrannical, making decisions without consulting his family. Perhaps a decision has to be made regarding a change of job or home location, or even such a simple matter as family recreation. Since all members of the family will be affected, would it not be wise and kind to consult all of them? Their opinions may help us to arrive at a wiser, more considerate decision. Then it will be easier for all in the family to support him." Right? So taking it to others, how others will be affected by our decision. Another example, we're at a party, we're at a gathering, and we consciously decide to drink, and we consciously decide to drive. Now, we're not going to outline limits or whatever, what our tolerance is, but we consciously decide to drink, we consciously decide to drive, and we hurt someone. Again, keeping in mind when we make decisions, it's our decisions, but we need to keep in mind how other individuals will be affected as well. Now, another key point that we need to keep in mind when it comes to making decisions, not just our conscience really, it is looking to Jehovah for direction. Our Watchtower articles, it makes a very good summary of that, and it cites an example of Adam and Eve, right? Adam and Eve lived in a perfect garden. Right? They had all this wonderful food to eat, with the exception of meat. They were happy. They didn't know any better. Right? Jehovah blessed them. They had a marvelous, interesting job. They loved their work. Every morning they woke up, they'd go to work, and they knew what they were going to do, and they loved it. Jehovah challenged them mentally, right? And they appreciated that. and they had the opportunity to live forever and have children that will serve Jehovah. But one of the very first decisions that they made on their own was contrary to what Jehovah outlined for them. And we can see the disastrous result that happened for them. The loss of everything that they had, the paradise earth, right? And all of their offspring are now suffering and dying. So then that outlines the responsibility then is not to decide what is right and what is wrong, but to decide between right and wrong. There's a difference. Jehovah, our Creator, outlines what is right, what is wrong. Our decision as humans, as His creation, is to choose between the two. Right? It's not up to us to decide what is and what is not. Jehovah made that clear. Our decision is to choose between. Now, three main points that we're going to discuss in this section. The first one, we need to turn to Jehovah in prayer to seek His guidance. That's first. Second, we need to reason and apply Bible principles. And third, we need to consult mature Christians when making decisions. So let's consider one at a time. The first one, we need to turn to Jehovah in prayer, seeking His guidance. We use the example of Adam and Eve, right, about making decisions. He already outlined for them what's good, what's bad. Yet they still wanted more. They chose incorrectly. And so when it comes to certain decisions, particularly life-altering decisions that we may make, we need to consider Jehovah's decision on the matter. Is it right or is it wrong? Is it beneficial or is it detrimental? Right? So we always need to look to Jehovah for guidance. And that doesn't matter whether it's a big decision or something as simple as, well, what TV show should I watch? We need to consider Jehovah's viewpoint on the matter. The second one is we need to reason on Bible principles. So for this one, we'll take 3 scriptures, and then we'll try to reason on it as to how we can make decisions. Let's take a look first at Matthew 22, verse 37. Now, this isn't directly speaking about the decision of marriage, but see how the principle applies. We're talking about marriage. So Matthew chapter 22, verse 37. He said to them, "You must love Jehovah your God with your whole heart and with your whole soul and with your whole mind." Now, what's this got to do with marriage? Well, nothing directly, but principally, how does that help us? Well, if I were to consider looking outside Jehovah's organization for a marriage mate, will I be applying the principle of loving Jehovah with my whole everything? Something to keep in mind. Does my prospective mate, whoever they may be, have the same qualities as I, where they love Jehovah with their whole heart, soul, and mind? Because if they do not, then how will that affect my relationship with Jehovah? And then another portion of this, another question we can ask is, how will having a mate affect my personal relationship with Jehovah? If I have goals now, if I have privileges of service that I'm doing now, and I choose to marry, how will that affect my relationship with Jehovah? Again, scriptural principle, not a decision that directly affects it, but using the principle to help us make that decision. Another example, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 15. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 15, it says, "Through him, let us always offer to God a sacrifice of praise. That is the fruit of our lips that make public declaration to his name." Now, we know what this sacrifice of praise entails, right? Going out in service, commenting at the meetings, right? Offering to God a sacrifice of praise. But then, if I were to stay out late on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and I do not make it out in service, or I make it out in service, but I'm just like this. You know, I'm out in service, but brother or sister, you do take all the doors. I'll take them out at home. So we're not fully functional. Well, how does that decision affect our principle when it comes to always offering to God a sacrifice of praise? Do we see the point? The principle is very different, but it can apply to different things in our life. Well, what if I were to take up extra work or schooling, and I have to miss some of the meetings, or miss going out in service, miss the CO visit, miss the convention? Am I following this principle of always offering to God a sacrifice of praise? It can. Well, how about this? Does my sacrifice of praise include watching what I say to others so as not to offend or hurt their feelings? Again, not directly related, but using Bible principles to make sound decisions. And that's what Bible principles will do for us. If we look at it, we consult it, and think on it, meditate on it, we can use it for practically any decision we need to make. But consult Bible principles. Let's take another one. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. A command, but we know the principle behind it. 10:24 says, "And let us consider one another so as to incite to love and fine works." We're talking about meeting attendance, right? Well, how can I incite to love and fine works if I harbor resentment towards someone in the congregation? And I just, you know what, I know that brother was going to be there, so I'm just going to go attend another meeting. What if the principle, again, we're talking about attending meetings here, incite to love one another and to fine works. You know what? I forgive him, but I will not forget. I think that's a song. But do we see the point? It affects all aspects of our life. Our service to Jehovah is affected if we do not apply Bible principles. And that's how important Bible principles are. And so it's important for us to take the time to read and study them so that we can make sound decisions. The last point in this section that we'll talk about as far as making decisions is consulting mature Christians on serious matters to avoid making snap decisions. The principle in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15 says that the way of the foolish one is right in his own eyes, but the one listening to counsel is wise. The one listening to counsel. And so let's say we are faced with a decision, and we're really not sure. We already, step one, pray to Jehovah. That's step one, right? Ask him for direction. We did step two. We considered Bible principles. And we're still kind of iffy. Well, step three, according to the scriptures, is consult mature Christians in the congregation. Now, when we say mature ones in the congregation, that doesn't necessarily have to be our BFF who will tell us everything's rosy and fine. You know, a subjective individual, a brother or a sister. It doesn't matter who they may be, but someone who is spiritually mature. Consult them, and then they may be able to help you to make a sound decision. The caution. Even though we may consult mature Christians, and they may help us to try to make decision, we need to recognize that it is our responsibility to make that decision. The point is, it doesn't matter, not that it does not matter, but the brother and sister may tell us what their thoughts are. But ultimately, it is our decision, and we will be held accountable to Jehovah. Remember Adam? This is an example. What did he say after he was proven in the wrong? It was the woman you gave me. When Eve was confronted, what did she say? It was the serpent. See? They made their own personal decisions, yet they blamed someone else. And so that could be the truth, the same with us. Whenever we need to make a decision, we make this decision, and we will be held responsible and accountable for that decision. blaming someone else for what they said or he said, whether wrong or right, will not absolve us of that responsibility, of that accountability to Jehovah. Now let's talk about another aspect of making decisions, and that is living up to our decisions. At Matthew chapter 5, verse 37, Jesus said that let your yes mean yes and your no, no. Basically, when you make a decision, you follow through. You say yes, it's yes. When you say no, no. The most important decision, well, let me rephrase that, that's later on. One of the second biggest decision we'll ever make is whether we are going to marry someone, right? The first one is dedication and baptism to Jehovah. So suppose that we decide to get married and let's say things just didn't turn out as rosy as we wanted it to be. Are we still fulfilling our commitment to love and to cherish and deeply respect for as long as we both shall live together here on earth? Ooh, that's a long one. See, problems will arise. But when we said yes to that commitment, to that covenant, problems have arisen. Are we now starting to think about, oh, well, you know what? They just sleep funny here. I don't like their cooking. Talked about that in our Christian life and ministry, about the importance of divorce, right? And how Jehovah feels about that. And so, will we allow our decision to falter because problems have arisen? Or are we going to stick to it according to what Jehovah has directed us to do? Something to keep in mind. Now, again, we're talking about marriage. That highlights for us the importance of courtship as well. When we decide that we want to pursue courtship with another, do we fully realize the responsibility of that? That it's a lifelong commitment. Once again, are we willing to say yes, let our yes mean yes and our no, no? Now, being single, we may not think about it that way, but being single is also a decision. Staying single is also a decision, right? We might say that, well, yeah, no, my circumstances don't allow it. Yeah, that's true. But if we think about it, the world, you can marry anyone. But we choose not to because we are obeying Jehovah's law and direction. So that's a decision in itself. And Jehovah will bless us for our efforts for living up to that decision of not getting married to someone who is not one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes, circumstances may not permit it, but think about it that way. Jehovah will bless us for that decision, to remain single. And another thing when it comes to making decisions, even though we may make the right decisions, we may continue for a time to suffer some problems because of bad decisions that we have made in the past. So, for example, we may have been corrected in the past. We may have been disfellowshipped. We may have been reproved. We may have been counseled. And so we are suffering right now, or we may have suffered, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean let your yes mean yes? Well, you know what? I'm in trouble anyway, so I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. You know? That's not in alignment with Bible principles. Right? What this is that we, if we strive to do what is right in Jehovah's eyes right now, from this point onward, then yes, we may suffer the consequences of bad decisions in the past, but Jehovah will bless us. Let's take a look at David's example, right? He made very bad decisions, and he suffered for the rest of his life. Think about that. For the rest of his life, he did not have peace because of the bad decisions that he made. Yet Jehovah spared his life and preserved the Davidic covenant, right? And so, even though we may have made bad decisions in the past, we are suffering for it or have suffered, keep in mind that if we strive to do Jehovah's will from this point onward, that we do our best to serve Him, Jehovah will ultimately bless us. There will be pain, there will be suffering, but He will bless us. Now, the most important decision, of course, is taking up worship of Jehovah. Watchtower will consider that in great detail this afternoon. But our dedication to Jehovah and by symbolizing that by baptism is the most important decision that any human can make. The bottom line, if we have yet to make that decision, we need to make that decision. It's as simple as that. If we consciously know that we need to make a decision and we choose not to, what's the consequences according to the scripture we read earlier? Jehovah will judge us as being two-souled, indecisive in our actions. If we choose not to do that, to not get baptized right now, not to dedicate our life to Jehovah, that is a decision. Really, that's a decision to reject Jehovah if we are of sound mind right now. So, James chapter 4, verse 8. James chapter 4, verse 8. Draw close to God, and He will draw close to you. The point? Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts. So turn away from all the things you did before. Cleanse your hands, purify your hearts, you indecisive ones. Again, that point of being two-souled. So the decision to make for us, that we need to make, the most important one, is to take up worship of Jehovah. We need to keep that in mind. If we draw close to Him, He will draw close to us. And He's not just like, waiting here, come on, what are you going to do? Right? I have that illustration of the forgiving father, or the prodigal son, as it's most commonly known. The father was looking out for that son. And if we make an effort to come to Jehovah, He will come to us. He will meet us, probably more than halfway. Right? He will draw close to you so long as we draw close to Jehovah. So then, friends, decisions you make, or rather you face, how will you make them? A review of our discussion. First, avoid being indecisive. Do not be indecisive. The second point, use wisdom in making decisions for which we are responsible for. That means making decisions commensurate to our role, use our Christian conscience, and keep in mind that our decision will affect others. The third point, make wise decisions by looking to God for direction. Looking to God for direction. 3-step process. Turn to Jehovah in prayer, consult the scriptures, and consult mature Christians. And the most important part, the fifth point, or the fourth point, live up to our decision. Live up to our decision. See, Jehovah didn't create us to be mindless robots, right? He gave us the opportunity. Some people may consider it a curse, but it's not. It's a wonderful gift. It's a privilege. He does not force us into slavery. He never forces us to do right. He never forces us to do wrong. He outlines for us what is right and what is wrong. And He honored us. He condescended to our level by giving us the opportunity to choose for ourselves. The freedom of choice, free will. He blessed us with that. So friends, let's use it wisely. Let's live up to our decision. Let's make sound decisions and make Jehovah happy and proud. And soon, as we continue to make decisions on a day-to-day basis to serve Jehovah, very shortly, we will all be in that paradise earth with life eternal in view.
I want to thank you, Brother St. Louis, for the fine information you provided for us. We will try to apply it in our daily life so we can approach Jehovah in a more acceptable way and get a good relationship with our brothers in the congregation. Next week we have another fine talk that's going to be presented. It will be given by Brother Eric England from the Oakland West congregation. He will be delivering the talk, Cherish Your Place in the Kingdom Arrangement. So we look forward to that talk next week. Now we'll turn our attention to our Watchtower study, and Brother Newman will lead us into that.
Thank you, Brother Thomas, and welcome everyone to our consideration of the Watchtower article this week. Again, we're talking about making a very important decision, the most important decision today. So that's what we're going to be talking about. But before we get started, let's rise together if we're able to do so. We're going to sing song number 52, which is entitled Christian Dedication. That's song number 52. Today we're going to be considering the article from the March 2019 study edition of the Watchtower. It's study article number 10 for this year, and the title of it is, What Prevents Me from Getting Baptized? So Acts 8:38 gives us a very important scripture there and some information. Philip and the eunuch went down into the water, and he baptized him. So let's see what our article is about there at the preview. You just push that little button, and now we can preview the whole article. It says, the most important decision you will ever make is whether you will get baptized or not. Think about that for a minute. The most important. Not getting married, not buying a house, not anything else like that. Getting baptized is the most important decision. So why is that decision so important? This article will answer that question. It will also help those who are thinking about getting baptized to overcome challenges that might be holding them back. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So today we've asked Brother Andrew Merrin to do our reading for us, and let's see what Adam and Eve lost in paragraph 1.
Who do you think should set the standards for what is good and what is bad? When Adam and Eve ate the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, they sent a clear message. They did not trust Jehovah and his standards. They chose to set their own standards of good and bad. But look at what they lost. They lost their friendship with Jehovah. They also lost the opportunity to live forever, and they passed sin and death on to their children. Adam and Eve's choice led to misery.
Okay, thank you very much, Brother Marin. Appreciate that. Question for paragraph number 1. What did Adam and Eve lose, and with what result? Let's get Desiree, please. Would you like to start us?
They lost their friendship with Jehovah.
Very good. Okay. Jadon, please.
They not only lost the right to live forever, they also died.
Very good. Thank you. Let's get Ivan, please, in the middle.
Eve ate the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. They sent a clear message. They did not trust Jehovah.
Very good. Thank you. Let's get Caleb, please, in the back.
And they passed sin and death on to their children.
Awesome. Thank you. Very hard for us. Let's get Sister Crochet and Sister Ati right in front here.
And since they passed on the sin, that led to death, and it led to misery as we experience today.
Sure do. Sister Ati.
Exactly. They lost the opportunity to live in paradise, which would have been a beautiful place to be under Jehovah's arrangement. Everything was provided for them, like the brother brought out in the talk. Beautiful work that challenged them mentally. Instead, they were ousted into the cursed land where they had to make their own food in their own way. It was truly miserable.
Yes, thank you. Sister Wyrick, please.
So we see that they truly did not trust Jehovah and his standards. They chose to set their own standards of good and bad, and we can see all the misery that comes from that.
Yes, thank you. And Sister Smothers, please.
So at that time, sin entered into the world when they deliberately disobeyed their Creator. Sin and imperfection did not exist until then.
Okay, very good. So does that mean we're all doomed for eternity now? Well, let's move on to paragraphs 2 and 3, and let's see what we can learn from the Ethiopian eunuch and the decision he made.
Compare the way Adam and Eve behaved with the way the Ethiopian eunuch responded when Philip preached to him. The eunuch appreciated so much what Jehovah and Jesus had done for him that he immediately got baptized. When we dedicate ourselves to God and, like the eunuch, get baptized, we send a clear message. We show that we appreciate what Jehovah and Jesus have done for us. We also show that we trust Jehovah and recognize that he is the one who should set the standard of good and bad. Think of the blessings we receive when we serve Jehovah. For one thing, we have the prospect of eventually gaining all that Adam and Eve lost, including the opportunity to live forever. Because of our faith in Jesus Christ, Jehovah forgives our mistakes and gives us a clean conscience. We also become part of Jehovah's family of approved servants with a blessed future ahead of us. Despite these obvious benefits, though, some who have come to know Jehovah hesitate to follow the example of the Ethiopian eunuch. What might prevent them from getting baptized? And how can they overcome those challenges?
Paragraphs 2 and 3, the A question, how did the Ethiopian eunuch respond when Philip preached to him? Let's get Jamal Jr., please.
When Philip preached to the Ethiopian eunuch immediately got baptized.
Okay, excellent. Josiah Crochet, please.
Ethiopian eunuch appreciated everything Jesus and Jehovah gave to them, so he wanted to get baptized right away.
Okay, excellent. What do we see in our picture here? Who are these people here? What's happening? Brother Cunningham, Jamal?
Well, you see that Philip is at the body of water where he baptized the Ethiopian eunuch, and you could tell by the expression on the eunuch's face that he is completely delighted. And in addition to that, we know that the Ethiopian eunuch had been reading, but once he understood then he was compelled to get baptized.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, a lot of hands. Let's give Brother Thomas, then Brother Thompson in the back.
It was the book of Isaiah, the 53rd chapter, verses 1 through 12, which is only 12 verses in that. And that the scroll that he had, that the Ethiopian eunuch had, he was reading it. He didn't really quite understand it. So Philip explained it, what it meant and everything. So he responded quickly.
Very good. Thank you. And Brother Thompson?
So he even went to the extreme that said, when he said to Philip, that I beg you, about whom does this prophet say this? And about himself or about some other man?
Very good. So you wanted to learn. Brother Rogers, please.
And so once he had the proper understanding, that Philip explained the scriptures to him and explained who the Messiah was, then that's when he said, I understand now. Then once he understood, his question was, what prevents me from getting baptized? And there was a body of water, and Philip says nothing, and he baptized him.
Let's do it, right? There's nothing holding him back. So what do we learn from this? Let's ask the B question. What blessings do we receive by getting baptized, and what questions will we consider today? So what blessings do we get? Brother McCullough in the back?
For one thing, we will have the prospect of eventually gaining all that Adam and Eve lost, and gaining everlasting life, have an opportunity to gain everlasting life.
Very good. Sister Cox up front, and then Sister Huey.
And then a wonderful opportunity of being forgiven by Jehovah because we constantly make mistakes, and we can live with a clean conscience.
Good. And Sister Huey?
I remember the sister that called on me. The first call, I was so enthralled with the truth that I wanted to get baptized. And she said, well, you have a little ways to go.
Very good. Brother Marin, please.
Yes, the truth. We learn the truth. And as Jesus insinuated with Pilate, that there's only one truth. That's from Jehovah. It has to do with the whole universal. So as we go on in our study, we'll cover that point from John 8:32, I guess it is.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's see. Okay, so we make that decision to get baptized. We're sending a message to who, and what message is that? Sister Hilliard?
Well, we're sending a message that we're very appreciative to Jehovah and Jesus for what they have done, and that we lost the words, but anyway, that we fully trusted Jehovah, and we want to be a part of his family and have a close relationship with him.
Yes, exactly right. And Sister Thomas, please.
And because of our faith in Jesus Christ, Jehovah forgives us our mistakes and gives us a clean conscience.
Okay, thank you. So what questions are we going to answer today? First, we're going to ask them, and then we're going to answer. So what are those questions? Tamiko, please. How many do we have here? How about us giving both of those to us?
Oh, okay. The first one says, what might prevent them from getting baptized? And the second one is, and how can they overcome those challenges?
Okay, very good. So that's what we're going to talk about first, challenges that prevent some from getting baptized. Let's consider paragraphs 4 and 5.
Lack of confidence. Every's parents are Jehovah's Witnesses. His father has an excellent reputation as a caring father and an effective elder. Yet Avery held back from getting baptized. Why? I did not think that I could be able to live up to my father's reputation, he says. Avery also lacked confidence that he would be able to handle responsibilities that he might be given in the future. I worried about being asked to pray in public, to give talks, or to lead a group in the field service. Hannah, age 18, suffered from a severe lack of confidence. She was raised by parents who served Jehovah. Even so, she doubted that she could live by Jehovah's standards. Why? Hannah had developed a very low opinion of herself. At times, she felt so bad that she would deliberately injure herself, which only made things worse. I never told anyone about what I did, not even my parents, she says. And I imagine that Jehovah would never want me because of what I was doing to myself.
Paragraphs 4 and 5, the question is, what challenges did a young man named Avery and a young woman named Hannah face? So let's start with Avery. What did he face? Sister Joe, please.
Avery lacked confidence. He knew that the expectations are that once you are baptized, that there is a growth process, and that would include perhaps for a brother handling parts from the meeting and taking people out in service, and so he lacked confidence to fulfill those possible responsibilities.
Okay, good. And what led up to that? Sister Marin, please. Jeanette Marin.
Apparently his father had a fine reputation, and so it seemed almost impossible for him to copy that like his father.
Yeah, that was in his own mind, though, right? Brother Alban, please.
So his lack of confidence was from comparing himself to someone else, which is nothing between Jehovah and himself, but he was adding another person in there.
Yes, thank you for that. And what about Hannah? What did she face? Sister Harris, please.
Well, Hannah was 18 and she suffered from a severe lack of confidence. And her parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, but she doubted that she could ever live up to Jehovah's standards. And she had developed such a low opinion of herself that at times she felt so bad that she would deliberately hurt herself. And no one knew about this.
Yes, thank you, Sister Melania Marin, please.
And then that just kind of created a vicious cycle, because then she felt bad about what she was doing, and she imagined that Jehovah would never want her because of what she did to herself.
Yes, very good. And this is common. We see this in congregations all over. But we're going to find out later what happened to her, why that really wasn't an obstacle for her. So let's move on now to paragraph 6, and let's talk about another example of Vanessa.
Influence of friends. Vanessa, age 22, says, I had a really good friend whom I had known for almost a decade. However, Vanessa's friend did not support Vanessa in her goal of getting baptized. That hurt Vanessa, and she says, I find it hard to make friends, and I was worried that if I ended that relationship, I would never have another close friend.
Paragraph 6 question, what held Vanessa back from getting baptized? Sister Mazik, please.
Well, Vanessa had a really close friend who did not share her love for Jehovah and her decision to get baptized, and she was afraid that if she did get baptized that she might lose that friend, and it had been hard for her to develop that friendship.
Very good. Thank you. Brother McCullough in the back, please.
And that friend did not support her getting baptized or even love Jehovah. So she had a very bad friend.
Very good. She may not have been really bad, but she just didn't love Jehovah, right? So that was like an obstacle for her. Sister Chamberlain, please, and then we'll get Caleb.
So these examples here show that these people had very persuasive influences. And with Hannah, she apparently had emotional self-esteem about herself, a low self-esteem to the point that she only had confidence in one friend. And so this friend had an effect on her character, behavior, and values. So she didn't support any of the decisions that she really had in her heart.
Very good, thank you. Caleb, please.
Vanessa's friend did not support Vanessa in her goal of getting baptized.
Very good, so that's a big obstacle, isn't it? Brother Marin, please.
This friendship started when she was 12 years old, obviously before she knew anything about the truth. So she had a real attachment for this other person. For 10 years, he developed this friendship in the world, and all of this that came into the truth out of the world. Well, I remember my high school days. I had some good buddies. They were all hippies or something. I don't know. But you remember that, and I think back, wow, I wonder if I could talk to him about the truth.
Yeah, so it always comes up in your mind, doesn't it? Brother Cunningham?
And when we look at the picture, it's obvious that her close friend was not a servant of Jehovah based on their dress and grooming and the sisters in the background. And it seems at times that we might say it would be easy just to stay away. But when you go to school and you've been going to school with them since grade school all the way to high school, or you meet them, it's kind of hard to not form some kind of association with these people. But the fact is even if they're not bad, they are not pushing you towards Jehovah or spiritual goals.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. Sister Autier, please, and then Brother Thompson in the back.
Just to add to that, the influence then of the friend who's not a servant of Jehovah it takes her away from associating with friends in the congregation. And that's the obstacle right there.
Yeah, she might be the best person in the world, but she's still an obstacle there. Brother Thompson?
And as you can look at the picture, it seems like the one who's not the witnesses looks like they're degrading our sisters who's doing some public witnessing at maybe at bar or whatever, but at the same time, the sister looks like she's dejected about what perhaps she may be saying, because she's looking away versus acknowledging this is what we do.
Yeah, she acts like she's embarrassed, doesn't she? But we're going to see what decision she made later on too in our article. So let's move on to another obstacle.
Make then. So let's turn our attention to him as he presents it to us.
All of us makes multiple decisions every day that we have to make. If you are a coffee drinker, unlike me, you probably have an issue whether to get venti or grande. I still don't know the difference because I don't drink coffee. Or if you're like me, then one of the hardest decisions that I have to face is when I'm asked the question, medium or large. Right? So it's not just on trivial day-to-day things that we are faced with decisions. We cannot help making decisions. But more importantly, when it comes to Jehovah and his service, making decision takes on a whole level of gravity, a whole level of weight, does it not? It's more than just paper or plastic, right? It's deeper in meaning. Now, many people, when it comes to serving Jehovah, have a tendency to be indecisive, not wanting to make a decision. Turn your Bibles, please, to the book of James chapter 1, verse 7 and 8. And let's see what the Bible's viewpoint is on this issue of being indecisive. James chapter 1, verse 7 and 8. And again, we're talking about service to Jehovah. James chapter 1, 7 and 8. In fact, that man should not expect to receive anything from Jehovah. Why? Verse 8, he is an indecisive man, unsteady in all his ways. Now notice how the Bible says that if one is indecisive, he is unsteady in everything.